Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Aaron's Opinion. Tonight, or today, or this morning, whenever you're listening to this, we are very, very pleased and very honored to be speaking with Gary Kammerer. And before we get into talking about UVC Radio and all the important work that you do for UVC Radio, I, of course, will ask the question that I ask everyone, and then we will walk through the conversation together. Who is Gary Kammerer?
Wow, that's a big one. So, for me, who am I? Well, I am a father. I'm a husband. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a DJ. I am from a professional standpoint, career-wise, I am an accessibility engineer with CVS Health, and so that's what I do for a living. And outside of that, I have other different hobbies and things that I'm into, but I don't want to take up the whole hour. So,
Sure. Excellent. Very good. Okay. Now, in my case, I have glaucoma and a congenital heart defect. So, do you want to go into a little bit of your blindness history? Were you born blind like me, or did you become blind later?
so I was born blind. I had an operation done on one of my eyes when I was very young, which helped a little bit. But still, I'm low partial, so I have a little bit of light perception. I also have glaucoma, and from the medical standpoint, I also deal with epilepsy from time to time, which can be kind of interesting.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I would like you to talk to us about the connection between the accessibility work that you do for CVS and how that has led you to be connected with UVC radio and all of those things, because I think they're all really important and really interesting. So, dig into it if you want.
Well, sure. So CVS came later. It was a job opportunity I was able to get in April, but I've been working with UVC for a long time. We were initially a WhatsApp group, and so because of that, more or less, it was a situation where I was able to do some administrative work there, and then I had also been involved in quite a few other radio projects over the years, and all of those helped to give me the experience that I have now. And so I discredit nothing and no one. And so when I started working with UVC Radio, my vision was to create a place where, diversity could be at the forefront, inclusion could be at the forefront, but also high standards of quality output, whether it's the web development work that I'm doing with UVC Radio or the work that I do with automation or just about anything that I'm asked to put my hand to. I'm going to put my best foot forward with it. So
I see. I love the way you put that. Anytime someone says, basically, if someone says, "Hey, can you give me a hand?" You give them your best foot. That's pretty cool.
for sure.
Yeah, I get it. That's cool. That's a very wise and a very beautiful way of going about life. I appreciate it. Of course, I know a lot about UVC radio, but what if it's someone's first time listening to this video or podcast? Why don't you give a little tidbit of history for those at home who might not know anything about UVC radio? What is that, by the way?
Well, sure. So UVC Radio is an internet radio station, an international radio station, and we all like to say international radio station, but a lot of us are just maybe in one country or the next. But for us, our broadcasters are all over the world, from St. Lucia, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, India, here in the U.S., Europe, and so as far as Mauritius as well. And of course, our tagline is the sound that binds us together, right?
Absolutely.
So you can find us by going to uvcradio.org, and you can look at some of our past posts and content, and you can also check out our schedule where you can find information on shows. But we're also trying to do a bit more than just create a server that everybody can just hop onto. So we're working hard to market and monetize our platform as well, because we don't just want it to be a hobby, but we actually want to try to affect change through the work that we're doing, because it's not just for our health, if you will.
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And one of the things that I tremendously look up to about you and our great buddy, our great friend, King Rocco, and Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Wilbert, and all of our great friends there at UVC is that all of you are doing your best work and it's helping others. And that's a tremendously admirable quality of you. And that's a tremendously valuable thing. And quite frankly, I think that a lot of us young kids, us young generation, I think a lot of us have, some other people around the world apparently have lost track of that in my estimation. So it might be more important than you even realize to know that the work that you're doing simply to help other people, the helping other people and doing the right thing, that karma will definitely help us all. If you win, we all win. If I win,
That's
you
right.
win.
That's right.
And I might have said it a couple weeks ago when we were talking before, but I still believe it because it's true. So
Mm-hmm.
how the other interesting thing is, so exactly what do you need to do when you're actually doing work for UVC Radio? Why didn't you walk us through some of the engineering aspects, the ingredients of internet radio, how the software works? I mean, really try to really dig in here, try to really break it down and explain, what is the engineering behind internet radio? How does it work anyway?
So ultimately, it's a couple of different components, right? So you have the engineering component. You have the component which talks more about, ultimately just creating a website so people can actually visit this server without having to put in an IP address or something. And so you have that aspect of it, and your website is where you promote your content. And different people use different things, whether it be with studio, or people use automation or different things like that to try to get their system up and running. Different people have different rotations. For me, I kind of, without spoiling everything, I try to create a unique rotation of content. And I'm working hard to ensure that all of us have an opportunity to be empowered to do these things, because what I end up doing is what about six people might do, right? So it helps to, do what you can to empower other individuals to be a part of what's going on. I think that's crucial. And so that's one of the things that we do. And then, from my side of it, it depends on how you want to do it. Some people use a program called Station Playlist, which broadcasts out to that server so then people can hear it. And then some people use a program maybe called Mix. And what Mix does is you can actually hook up a controller, um, you know, to your computer, and you can actually mix and cut and do all of those wonderful things, right?
Right, exactly, and that's very, very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But you said you didn't want to spoil anything, which you shouldn't have said it, because now you know that I'm just going to squeeze the lemon harder, or now I'm going to try to make even more beer out of the barley here. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what didn't you want to spoil? Because you kind of walked into that trap, man. What don't you want to spoil?
Well, so when some people create automation, a lot of times they
What
just
is
put up
what is
a
what is automation? So it's good to kind of define terms, to some people listen to this and they don't know all of the
sure.
broadcasties that we understand. So what's automation? You've said it twice. It's important.
So automation is basically you're using either a server or a piece of software. You're basically using your computer is what's going to be the DJ when you're not there. When you're not broadcasting on air, something has to be there. It can't just be dead silence. So you have to arrange music and content in such a way where the apparatus or the server behaves as an actual station and not just plays a whole bunch of random music. So for me, I like to kind of do a tapestry of a lot of our content. And so in the mornings we might have pop and hip hop and stuff like that, and we're constantly working on ways to modify this rotation In the afternoon we may have like dancehall and soca and Afrobeat and stuff like that. In the evening, might have like roots reggae and stuff like that. And then during the nighttime, we kind of have like a quiet storm rotation. And then you know, on Sundays we kind of do the same thing from the gospel perspective, kind of bring international flair to it. So it's not just the humdrum religious type thing that people would normally anticipate or expect.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I believe. I think. Yeah, no, that's great, and I appreciate the fact that there are. I commend the fact that there are religious programs on Sunday. That's important.
For
So
sure.
that's good. That's good. I mean, it doesn't need to be there every day, but sure, Sunday you should definitely have some religious content. It gives diversity to the station, and it makes, and again, it reminds people that you care about God, that you truly care
Right.
about others by having some religion, some philosophy in there. It's showing other people that you do actually actively care and that you're actively thinking of them, and
Right.
that's really, really important. So you say that let's just say, for instance, UVC Radio, of course, part of United Vision Connect. You aren't so involved in that. I've spoken to Rocco and Mr. Wilbert about those things. They've given me more of a analysis on United Vision Connect, which is where UVC Radio came out of. But so UVC Radio, there's a lot of blind people in other countries that you say are broadcasters. So for one thing, what can you tell me about some of those people? And what do they do? And then what is the process that a DJ from overseas would go through to get connected and get onto UVC Radio if they have a show overseas?
So one thing that we like to do is provide premier support and training to all of our broadcasters. We don't just, put people out there and say, well, here you go. Just go on your merry way and do whatever. We really sit down with people and say, what do you want to do? What type of show do you want to do? How do you want to carry this thing out? And let them know that you're invested in them. And, we spend time teaching them, how to do broadcasting, how to, manipulate the software to do what you want it to do. And a lot of times, a lot of our people that we come across are not necessarily always all that tech savvy. A lot of them, are beginner to intermediate computer users. And so sometimes not only do you also teach broadcasting, but you're also teaching fundamental ways of being productive when it comes to, keyboard navigation or being a power user or using a screen reader in order to, present this content. Because in order to broadcast, you've got to have some sort of understanding of how to use a computer and different things like that. So that's what we
Yeah,
provide.
and that's really interesting is that now these things that we're doing, podcasting, YouTube creation, broadcasting, all of these things have become, over the last 10 years, I've noticed that they have become tremendously easier to do and tremendously less technically dependent. Meaning, what I mean is, 10 or 20 years ago, you would need a significant amount of knowledge 20 years ago to have the conversation that we're having now. Whereas now, you just sign on and talk. It's a lot,
Right.
it's a lot easier for people. So,
Precisely.
out of curiosity, like how many DJs in general from around the world outside of the States, how many of them contact UVC Radio? And then like how many different people like request to have their show on the station? And then how do you vet the requests and decide really where the quality is? What's your line of quality, or not line of quality, but benchmark?
Submission process, right? So
Correct, in that direction. Yes, exactly. Yes.
So when we first started, I was kind of like, even if it's just us four getting started, and this is how it is for a little while, that's okay. But what happened was we had this influx of people who became interested in what was going on with UVC Radio. It kind of, UVC Radio, whether inadvertently or not, has kind of overshadowed United Vision Connect a little bit. It's taken a lot more bandwidth than I think people anticipated. And, so we're trying to kind of redevote some of those resources and things like that to continue to focus on the foundation, which is United Vision Connect. But from UVC Radio's perspective, our vetting process is very simple. And it really comes down to, do you know how to follow instructions? And you'd be surprised as to how many people cannot follow instruction.
Boggles my mind.
And
Boggles my mind
it's
too.
for us, it's really that easy, because at the end of it, when I say I need you to email me and tell me what type of show you want to do or what is your interest level, and you can't even comply with that, it just, you basically take care of the vetting process for us. Um,
It's, I mean,
it,
okay, partially true. I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm in agreement with you, and I'm also in disagreement with you
okay,
because here's why. Sometimes in other countries, they have different cultural and social norms for how an interaction in the business world should go. So just because you and I think in the States that someone should follow directions, send Mr. Camera an email, put a subject here and blah, 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 in some other countries around the world, they do not always understand and place value on that one thing. So it
right.
does depend. I mean, you're right to vet it that way. That's correct. But I've traveled a lot, as you have. I've done a lot of traveling, and I've noticed that certain parts of the world have extremely different expectations. I guess, have you experienced that on UVC Radio? Have you noticed different expectations from different parts of the world as far as the listener side or the broadcaster side?
For sure. I've definitely experienced that. But what I try, like, I do understand that, cultural norms are going to be different. They're going to vary, even from state to state here in this country. They're going to vary. Not maybe so widely, but they are going to vary. And they're going to vary from country to country. But what we also have to make sure that we don't do is, justify, um, and I'm just going to say it how I'm going to say it. We don't want to justify substandard expectations based on what we think should be expected of someone from a certain place.
Right.
And I think that's where you kind of have to be careful. And the thing is, I was talking to somebody. We were in a group at one time, and somebody was talking about how, they were doing a particular event, and they were supposed to get paid for an event. And basically, I said, well, you got to get your money before you do the event. And they're like, well, that's not how things are done in JA. I'm like, well, and here's the kicker right here. All right. If I'm approaching someone from, let's say, I'm in Senegal and I'm approaching someone in the United States and I want to become a part of this project. When in Rome, do what the Romans do. So just like for me, if I go to Mexico, it should be expected that I should know some, at least, the basic understanding of Spanish. I should be able to have some conversation. I should be able to, handle business a certain way. If I, go to Jamaica, I should know, and understand certain cultural norms. So if you're approaching someone that is based, you know, in a certain place, you should act accordingly because that's what's going to be expected of me. And a lot of
Sure.
times we expect, other people, we expect people to conform to us, but sometimes we don't want to conform to them, and sometimes vice versa. And that's what gets us in a lot of trouble.
It goes both ways. It's for
Mm-hmm.
sure. It's a two-way street. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Really interesting. Really interesting. What can you tell me about the listenership of UVC Radio? Where have you found most of the listeners, and what are some interesting things you've noticed about the listeners of UVC Radio over the years?
Well, it's a very diverse group of people. You may have people, from anywhere from Panama to Texas to Michigan to Jamaica to Trinidad to Canada, and you might have all of those places represented at one time in a list of real time statistics. Um, what I find also interesting is that, um, we have really, exemplified a lot of quality. A lot of our broadcasters have worked with international artists and promoters, such as R.D. Cuban and Peter Tosh and different people, Peter Tosh's daughter rather, there's a lot of different people that we've had a chance to interact with. Alex from TOK, different reggae artists as well as gospel artists as well, and so we've had opportunities to rub shoulders with a lot of different people with different viewpoints from different places, and that's really what UVC represents: is this idea that sound or music or an understanding for these things is a universally valued thing that binds us together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What specific show or program do you host yourself on UVC?
So at this point, I host two shows, and I host Morning Glory, and I also host a show called The Ultimate Praise Party, and both of those are on Sundays. I've hosted other shows as well. I used to host a show called Friday Night Vibes, which was to showcase a lot of music from around the Caribbean and Africa and stuff like that. And then I also used to do a show called the Saturday Night Dance Party, where we focused on a lot of old school and music like that. And all of it, I would mix all of it. And so, it was a mixed show, and it was just this real nice vibe. And then, of course, I also work with King Rocco and Mr. Wilbert when it comes to Tell It Like It Is, which is a program, that looks at problems that people with disabilities face, but also focuses on things that everybody can relate to. For example, we just re-aired a program on co-parenting. And co-parenting is a very real thing, and it's something that a lot of us have to work through. So
Right.
it's we try our best to cater, and if we don't know something, we don't sit there and talk about it. If we don't really know the subject that well, we try to bring people in who that's their lane. We featured a lot of authors and different people like that, and so the whole journey has been great.
True. Are there? Oh, I because you said it was great.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put something in the mix for you here.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any episodes? Are there any aspects of UVC radio, or are there any areas of content, or basically, is there anything? Are there any aspects of any of the Tell It Like It Is programs? Is there anything that you would do differently or look back on and say, deep down in my heart, I kind of regret that episode in a philosophical way. What do you think to that? Is there anything that you would regret with all the
Um,
great things that are doing?
so tell it like it is. I can't say I've ever had one episode that I've ever regretted.
Good.
I can tell you that I've had some very controversial episodes. And but to me, that's really what feeds your audience.
Yeah.
If everything's just dandy and everybody just agrees with everything, you just you know you're not gonna you're not really gonna speak to too many groups of people. But when things do get a little controversial, I remember we had this one guy, this real hardcore Rasta guy, and he was like, but he didn't know, my racial makeup or whatever, and so basically, he was like, when it rains and white people, they're mongrels and they smell like wet dogs and all this other crazy stuff, and I was like, whoa, but I was like, hey, this is Tell It Like It Is. That's his opinion. Let him have it. At the end of the day, do I agree with it? No. Do I think he could have posed it differently? No. Probably some people would feel like, why would I even bring it up? Well, because it really lets you know that people are free to be who they are. At the end of the day, and everybody is passionate about something. whether it's good or bad or whatever the case may be, they're passionate about it. And, you know, if we learn how to give people that space, I feel like we could be a lot further. Now, you know, what could use work? What needs work? When I think about UVC radio, when I think about, you know, the makeup of our people, I think all of our people are great people. But I think that a lot of times as blind people, we are at a disadvantage because we are not necessarily taught how to be competitive. We're not taught how to be competitive. And so a lot of times we lack motivation and initiative to get things done because we always preach, you know, in from a US standpoint, we always preach equality and equality, and there's another word, almost entitlement. It's like we preach these things and we say, as blind people, you deserve these things, and you deserve this, and you deserve that, and you're entitled to this and that. But at the end of it, we don't show how to work towards these things or how to sustain these things beyond just, you know, having a pity party or, you know, having a riot or suing somebody to get what we want. A lot of times from an individual standpoint, we're not taught, you know, how to sustain these things, how to work toward, you know, a certain goal, how to work in corporate environments and things like that. And unfortunately, it affects even what we do with UVC radio, because a lot of times we have to hone in on certain things that, you know, to myself and maybe others would just seem self-explanatory, but a lot of times they're not.
Well, that's really interesting, and I think you're very right. And I've noticed it too. You know, in my community on this podcast, I've also noticed that there seems to be some disconnect at some points. You know, but what are some of these specific things that you think people need to hone in on? What do you think?
Well, it's not always that everything is going to be handed to you. It's not always that not everybody's just going to feed you. And like one of my friends said, and I have to introduce you to him. One of the things he said, he's like, you know, nobody is having a committee meeting about how to make your life better. Nobody's doing that.
That's true.
And so it's really up to you to be empowered and to be motivated to do these things yourself. But a lot of different things play a role into why, you know, people may not be motivated or may not feel that it's their responsibility. Whether it's, you know, how their country is run from a government perspective or maybe a cultural perspective, or there's so many different things that go into it. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that what I'm talking about is so easy to understand and digest, because there again, we're dealing with different people from different places. And so what I value may not necessarily be what the next person values. You know, they may, you know, feel that it's more of a corporate responsibility, you know, while I might feel it's more of an individual thing that needs to happen.
You know what I think the problem is? I think that people have forgotten that the only person they're competing with is themselves. And that's
right.
That's the only person. What's happening is that people have spent so much time comparing themselves to people that they'll never catch up to anyway, that they can't focus on bettering their own life and just saying,
Yeah, well, let's look at it from a different angle.
Sure. Go for it.
So, all right. So, you know, my only competition is myself. But if I'm not driven, it's hard for me to compete with myself, because no matter if I'm in a house or a fishbowl, I'm going to be content with where I'm at, which is fine in one way, but in the other way, better, you know. And I understand what you're saying, because there's a lot of hating going on, right? A lot of people hate on people because it's like, well, I ain't going to catch up to them, so I might as well hate on them. But my thing is, let's learn what they did to get where they are. Let's, you know, in a way, let's become our competitor's best friend. You know what I'm saying? Let's try to learn from them how did you get where you are? Because I want to be where you are. Not that I want to take your place, but I look at the accomplishments that you had in your lifetime and I say, you know, that's my inspiration. You know, there are people who may have $5,000 or $10,000 in their savings, and I look at them and I say, how did you get there? And I say, some people might feel like, oh, well, they're rich or they're privileged or they're this or that. But maybe they're just doing something different. Maybe they're not, buying the latest thing as soon as it comes out. Or maybe they're finding different ways to save money so they can save more. Or maybe, it's always another side to the story. It's always another angle.
Absolutely. No, that's true. I do see what you're saying. Um, but I mean, I didn't even mean it from the perspective of all the hateful things that people do, all the hate in the community. I just meant it that people are oftentimes fixated by the people at the top, at the top of the system, at the top of the ladder, at the top of the empire, or someone else. You probably do know who the podcaster is who says it. So in this case, let's not name drop. But as a great inspiration to me, a podcaster who I love and I would love to interview and I would love to be interviewed by, as he always says, we rise by lifting others, which means if we would only help one more person, that could, number one, help a million other people, which is what I do here on Aaron's Opinion, but also we're helping ourselves.
That's right.
Because doing the right thing does matter. And oh, by the way, the YouTube, certain creators who I'm not going to mention, certain people in the community all over the world who do not do the right thing, you look at their channels now, oh yeah, they aren't on YouTube anymore. Oh, they aren't uploading anymore. Because people don't stand for it. And people unsubscribe. And they lose,
Yeah, and a lot of times, if your motives are not right, it's hard to stay motivated. It's hard because, your consolation in doing the right thing keeps things positive. But if I'm always trying to figure out how I can screw you over, or I'm always trying to figure out, what I can do to mess you around or talk about you, if I spend most of my energy trying to find different subliminals that I can say towards one person or another, it's not getting me anywhere and it's not getting them anywhere. And trust me, the people you're trying to do wrong or talk about, they're not losing any sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's very accurate. What are what are some futuristic ideas, goals, and projects that you hope to do for UVC Radio? What's in the future?
So for me, because I want to focus more on my family and I want to focus a little bit more on, my career as well, what I'm going to start doing at the beginning of next month is to take more of an advisory role. I think that we have people in place at UVC Radio who can really push the vision forward. And just give me just one moment.
Sure.
So as I say, we have people who are in a position to push the vision forward. And so for me, I want to take more of a role of, if there's a question on marketing, if there's a question on, web development or, any question, that people may come to me and ask, how best to move forward. I certainly don't mind being in that role. But I think for me, having, a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old and also trying to, bring my family together, I think that it's more pertinent for me right now to focus on these things and to hone in and also, on my career goals as well. Because it's hard sometimes to get everybody else where you want them to be if you're not exactly where you want to be. And so sometimes you got to spend more time making sure that your feet are properly set under yourself and your family as well, so that then once that happens, you can continue to reach out more and be a help to other people. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We see it happen so often, whether it's in work, or a lot of times we see it more played out in ministry, in churches a lot. We see this situation where instead of church becoming a place of worship, it becomes an idol. And let's say I'm a pastor, and so I idolize, or let's just say I'm just an ordinary guy, and I idolize this church space. And so my ministry, which is not really my ministry, is something that God gave to me to do here. But in the context of how people view it, my ministry becomes number one. And what happens is, the rest of my family ends up lost because, I felt like my ministry was more important than my family. And I don't want to take that road for any cause or purpose. I want to make sure that, my family is where I would like them to be, so that, not only can I be a testament based on the external things, but you can also see that when it comes to, my family and the relationship that I have with my wife, that's also where it needs to be. It's not always going to be 100%. It's not always going to be perfect. But, when you recognize that certain things need to be done, and you recognize that there's certain things you need to take time honing in on, you need to go ahead and do that.
Right. Absolutely. And I think you're very wise, and I really appreciate you in a philosophical way and in a just honest way. I appreciate you taking the courageous step to basically know that, hey, I need to take a step back. There's other things that are more important, because I see it a lot, Gary. A lot of people around the community all over the world are getting into roles that a lot of people bite off more than they can chew. So it would just be easier to take small bites. And I appreciate you realizing that. But a lot of people get into these roles and then they can't fully do everything that role involves. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right, consistently. And then you become frustrated with others because they can't deliver. But how could they deliver if you've always been the one to do that?
Right. Or follow through. Lack of follow through.
Right. So instead of you always concentrating on delivery, you have to also focus on delegation.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Learn to delegate. Learn to give people an opportunity to learn their way through things. Because you can't be everywhere at once.
Absolutely. You are so right. What are some, I'm sure you're a man of many different interesting hobbies. What are some of the hobbies that you like to do? How else do you spend your time when you're not doing all of these things? What are some interesting hobbies?
Well, I love to spend time with my family.
I appreciate that.
I love to cook.
Ooh.
I'm always trying new things, and I'm always finding different ways of.
So, let's talk about food. What's your favorite meal to cook?
Ooh, that's tough. That's really tough. But my latest thing has been working on this recipe for slow cooked ribs, like pork ribs, and so you just slow cook them in the oven for a few hours, and you rub them down beforehand, and then just down home, just southern cooking and stuff like that. And also I'm also trying to venture out into learning how to cook things in a more healthy way, because as good as southern cooking might taste, at the end of the day is a better way of getting the job done. So I want to focus more on that as well. And so I want to get more into that arena of things as well. And so just doing that, and giving my children different experiences, traveling. These are some of the things that I would like to do even myself, in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, traveling is very exciting. I'm going to do it soon, and I've done a lot of traveling already. That's something that our family believes in tremendously, is that there's a huge value in travel, and that teaches you a lot of lessons. Definitely. Definitely. So, you like ribs? What are some other things you like to make?
Yeah, so I like to make seafood as well. Um,
Mmm.
I'm also into just making, I mean, just any myriad of things. Like I like to, you know, cook big breakfasts and stuff like that on the weekends and stuff, and just anything I can get my hands on to cook, I'm into it.
That's super good.
Hmm.
And that's really, really fascinating. So, where have you already traveled to? And have you ever traveled to a country where there is actually a DJ from UVC Radio?
So I have not traveled outside of the United States. I've traveled extensively through the United States, but I've never traveled outside. Definitely want to do that soon, and definitely want to try to create a situation where wherever I go, that there is a DJ at UVC Radio, and we can try to do something. We kind of had a gathering earlier this year. Me, myself, Rocco, and a few other people, as part of UVC Radio, just kind of got together and just had some fun. Here at my place, and so that was really enjoyable experience. And so I would love to replicate something like that somewhere else. So, yeah.
That's really cool. You could record a show maybe overseas and then have like a special or something like that. That would be really cool.
Oh, we
Yeah.
do it live. We do it live. You know what I'm saying? That's how we would do it live, and then we'd have it pre-recorded for a later time, but we definitely have it live. So.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I'm sure you have a lot of questions about me. I'm
Mhm.
also sure that you have a lot of questions about some of the interesting opinions I was giving out a couple weeks ago. But all the days fly by. I can't even keep track of the day. But whenever I was on UVC Radio, I think it was last week. I'm
Mhm.
sure you have. I'm sure I can sense in my podcaster's ear that you got there's some burning questions that you have for Aaron Richmond of Aaron's Opinion. Remember, it's an opinion show. It's not about facts. So you can ask me anything and everything. Nothing will offend me, and I will appreciate everything you want to ask. So really get under my skin, man. What do you really want to know? Dig into me.
Well, so I do know, that when we were talking on the show and things like that, you had told me that, you are Jewish. I do not know, if that means you're the Jewish faith. So here's one.
I love
Um,
it. So I give you
are you are you of the Jewish?
I give
Are
you a
you of
chance
the
to ask
Jewish
a
faith?
burning question, and you got okay. Need to try. So when the host asks, "What do you really want to know?" Just go to religion. Got to talk about religion. It's a religion show
Why
now. Go
not?
for
Yeah,
it.
why not? It's because
Love
some
it.
people say religion is opinion too, right? So
I like.
you know,
That's beautiful. I love talking about it. What do you want to know about the Jewish faith? That is, you know what, Gary? No one has asked me. That's so. The way you asked it is so beautiful. What do you want to know about us Jews? What do you want to know?
so are you just like, is that just your racial thing, or is that also your religious
I love.
belief
Oh,
as
I
well?
love that material. I love that
You
material.
know?
So are you? Wait a minute. Hold, slow down. Slow down the recorder here. So are you saying that Jews are a
No.
wait? Are you saying that Jews are a race?
Um, they are an ethnic group.
Correct.
They're not necessarily a race, but they're an ethnic group.
There you go. So Jews, in my opinion, being Jewish is not a race. There's been a
Hmm.
lot of debates about that. Okay.
Yeah.
I love talking about it. Jews are not a race
Hmm.
because they simply are not. Because Jews are not a race because having a faith in God,
Hmm.
God doesn't care what color your skin is or how tall you are or what you think. That's not how
Right.
it works. So the Jews, to clarify, and it's totally fine, by the way, nothing bothers me. And if you were of the perhaps not necessarily opinion, but if you were questioning whether Jews consider themselves to be a race or not, that would be an incredibly understandable thing, because there are a lot of groups of people around the world that say, well, I'm of this race, I'm of that creed, I'm of this group, that group. You know, not really. Not really. We're all people. Not really.
Yeah, well, you see that a lot from a biblical standpoint.
Absolutely.
You see a lot of that us and them type thing, and you see where, you know, for example, you know, people who call themselves Jews would not go through Samaria and different things like that.
It's interesting.
Right? And so it's always like this. Like in the beginning, it was a blood covenant, and then it became more of a spiritual thing as well.
So what about you? What about you? What's your philosophy? I love talking about this. What's your philosophy about God and the universe and why we're here on Earth?
So for me, and before I go any further, I always like to follow a question with a question. That's always fun, right? So, this is another thing that people get caught up in when it comes to Jewish people, and that is, you know, are you messianic? Are you not messianic? You know, and that's another thing people get caught up in. And for people who may not understand what I mean by that, you know, some Jews believe that, as Christians do, that, you know, Christ is Savior, and then some of them do not. And so that's always an interesting thing. So interesting debate people get into.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say, and I don't want to wander or stray too far. But in case you're wondering, and it's important to know if you're on someone, so you should know what their religion is and their philosophy about life. Basically, I'm of the belief, and a lot of blind people, we can circle back to the blindness. A lot of blind people ask, "Why me?" And I would respond by saying, because God knows I can, because God saw me as a strong person, and they said, "You can do this. We're gonna set you up. We're gonna set you up with the glaucoma, the congenital heart defect, the well, I don't know. There's so many different things wrong with me. I can't pick only two, but I don't know." God said, "Yeah, there's going to be a lot of things wrong with you, but we know you can overcome." And I think that in the meaning of life, and tags along and walks hand in hand with the meaning of being a successful person, is that no matter how many challenges God throws or society throws, what it's really about is, how do we do when we're in that storm, for one, and for another, how do we get up? You know, the question is, do you get up when you fall down? Because if you never fall, if you never fell down in life, then you never tried.
Then you never tried, right?
And that's truly the reasoning behind life, is to overcome. So that's my theory. I'm sure you would not be surprised to know that if there was some cure where I could be a sighted person and not have all of these, not have this personality, I'm sure you won't be surprised to know that I wouldn't change even one thing about me.
Right.
Not to say that I'm perfect. I'm far from it. There's plenty of things wrong with me, but I still love everything that's wrong with me.
Right. But you're you.
Right, because I'm me.
Right.
I'm an imperfect me, and I can definitely promise you that you're an imperfect Gary, who we still appreciate all over the world. So that's truly the meaning of life and the essence of philosophy. I have my suspicions, is that I think probably by the time the end time comes, to whatever the end time will be, I don't know. It's hard to say if we will still be around, if our great-grandchildren will be around to see it or not. At the rate that we're going, to be a pessimist, which, if I'm drinking a glass of beer, if I'm at your house drinking beer and eating your delicious ribs, you know, I can tell you, "Oh, Gary, my beer is always half empty," because I'm a half empty thinker. I'm always a pessimist. I always have to be negative, and here's why. It's better to be negative, so that way, when the 1% of the time when things work for us perfectly, which only happens 1% of the time, I can be like, wow,
it actually happened.
That worked. It's a miracle.
Right.
Because most of the time, Gary, my life is a struggle, just like yours is. Just like all of ours are. Most of the time, I'm thinking about things that I wish I could do or change or something, like that. That's why my message to you, if you're an optimist, well, you do you, but my glass will definitely be half empty. And then when it's full, I'll be appreciative. I'll say, "Well, thank you."
I'm a skeptic, or pessimist.
Yeah.
I don't know if those are two different things, but for me,
Well, they are. You just use two different words, so they have to be two
Right.
different things.
for sure. Well, so for me, I think being a pessimist makes me a better preparer.
Yes.
Because if you're positive all the time and everything's just going to work out, and you never really take the time to prepare for when things don't work. But
Right.
if you take the time to prepare, then when they do work, you're a step ahead, right?
Right.
But it's interesting. We kind of go back to overcoming a little bit. For me, I really feel like we overcome. Well, I can say for me personally, I know that I overcome through my relationship with Jesus Christ. For me,
It's a beautiful
that's
answer.
that's how I overcome, and I think that opportunity is open for everybody.
Right.
I know that a lot of times we get caught up in from a Christian perspective where we say, well, this group of people are going to hell and this group of people. But honestly, it was never our calling to condemn people. It was never, it's not even our place. We really don't have a place outside of Jesus. We don't have a place to put anyone. We don't even have a
Right.
place for ourselves
True.
because that's really, that's a sacrifice, that he made. So we don't see him going around, saying, well, this person's, going to hell and that person. No, not at all. It's the complete opposite. And so we need to take that into account and encourage people that, you can overcome. You can overcome by the God given determination and strength that you have, but you also overcome through faith. And for me, that faith is in Jesus Christ. Some people, they have, it might be faith in solely themselves, or faith in somebody they idolize, or maybe faith in their parents, or whatever the case may be. And all that is good and well. But, from my little corner of the world, that's kind of how I see things. So when things go right, I know who's ultimately responsible. It's got a little bit to do with me, but it has to do more so with, with me having that relationship with God, talking to God, and also, being able to give thanks even when things are difficult. So
Right.
that's my point of view on all that good stuff.
You know what I've noticed about you, and I know I've said it before. I'll say it again. You are a incredibly. You have such a beautiful voice. You have such a beautiful and articulate and pleasant way of talking. Have you taken any voice lessons, or do you sing? Because I noticed that your voice is really beautiful to listen to. You're just a really you speak. You use your voice well. Has someone ever trained you on like broadcasting or things like that? Because your voice is beautiful. Always wondered, by the way.
No, I guess for me, I listen to people speak, and I just it all just kind of flows into me, and then some of it kind of flows out. I do sing though, but I'm real modest, and so I do a lot of
Well,
different
you were
things.
really trying hard to dodge me when I was going to say, "So sing for me." You say you sing, and
Yeah,
then instantly you were thinking, "Wait a minute, that's a mistake. He's going to
right.
ask me to
Whoops.
sing."
Right. So I play a little bit. I sing. So
Right, 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 right.
I'm into different. I guess I got my hands in a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, yeah. I had an Australian guest who said they have a cute expression down under, where I'm
Hmm.
sure you have listeners in Australia. In Australia, they say, "I have my finger in many pies."
Yeah.
It's a very cute way of putting it.
Some people
Yes.
say, the other way of putting it is maybe I have a lot of irons in the fire, or you know,
Right.
different things like that. But
Right.
I like that many
Absolutely.
fingers in the pie. That's
I have many fingers. I have a finger in many pies. Yeah, it's a very
a
cute way.
finger in many pies. Oh
It's a
yeah.
very cute way of putting it, because in Australia they obsess about, they have some pie product that they make, or they have some obsession with some meal. It's probably something they just heat up, and it's probably like, don't tell me what, they probably just heat it up in the microwave for like 30 seconds, and like, you know, but we don't need to tell them that, you know.
Don't tell him.
Right. We secretly figured it out. Anyway, to make a long story short, or a short story long, I love talking to all guests. I absolutely adore talking to you. You probably didn't know this. I'll say it again. I have been wanting to talk to you for a while, and I'm glad. I appreciate this experience of talking to you now. But as we start to wrap it up, I'm going to give you the chance, since, well, I was hoping, I love the fact that you talked about religion. I absolutely adored it. But really, if you can ask me now only one more question to really make me sweat, to see if I'm worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you really want to know? You only have one more question.
Why do you even bother to podcast in the first place? Is it for attention? Is it to really help people? Like, what is your motive
My
for
motive
doing what you do?
My motive started like this. 3 years ago, still am. I'm a teacher, and I was teaching. When I wasn't teaching, I was listening to podcasts in the blindness and disability community. And it was my opinion, and still is, that a lot of these podcasts around the podcast ecosystem are not open to guests, are not open to Gary's opinion, are not open to Aaron's opinion. And quite
Right.
frankly, I had a problem with that. I disagreed with it. So what I did, Gary, is I went onto Facebook groups for blind people, and I'm in many of them, as you probably are. And if you aren't in those Facebook groups,
I'm in a few. I try to
Yeah.
try to keep them to a minimum. But
I
yeah.
know. I'm starting to lose. I'm starting to lose my patience too. I know some of these comments. I'm starting to get a little concern. It's starting to get a little concerning. Some of the things that people are talking about. But at any rate, I was going around and I was answering people's questions. Let's say someone asked me a question, Aaron, should I go to university? What I would do for that person is I would record my voice answering the question, and I would PM the answer back. Hey, Gary, you wanted to know about this today. Well, let's talk about it today. And then it occurred to me in the corner of my brain, that's a podcast, because I have an audience of people that won't stop asking silly questions. I love educating people. I love talking to people. I love opinions. Push record. Send it up there, see what happens. Next thing I knew, wham, bam, Bob's my uncle, Susie's my aunt. We got a thing on YouTube, a WhatsApp group. Gary, we're covered now. I mean, so that's why I do it. My motive, to be overly clear, my motive is simple. I want to help Gary. And if I help Gary, then Gary helps the world. Help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow. That's my motive.
Excellent. That's great.
If someone wants to get in touch with Gary, if someone wants to get in touch with UVC Radio, what would be the most appropriate way or the best way for the public in general to get in touch with you guys? What do you think?
Fastest way is facebook.com/UVC radio. It's that simple.
Excellent. Gary, you are forever welcome on Aaron's Opinion. It was an absolute honor to have you here today. Stay safe out there, Gary. God bless you. Keep up your great work with UVC Radio. Keep up your great work with your faith, your love for Jesus Christ and God and your family, your children. Blessings to all of you. And I just support everything you do. Keep up your great work, man. Stay safe out there, everyone else around the world. Keep listening, keep podcasting. And what's that?
I said, show enough.
And and help one person today. Help 1 million
people tomorrow.